Going forward, what do you believe our policy should be on the war on terror?
That's a tough one, too. Yeah, just to, my background is in foreign relations, and specifically within developing nations. So we deal with a lot of the aspects that play into that question. So it's a tough one for me to know a place to start with. You know, I think what you're getting to is you know, our involvement in Afghanistan. I believed at the time, and I believe now, that it was not a war of choice. It was the right thing for the United States to do, to go into Afghanistan. We were struck on 9/11. The Taliban, which was the government in Afghanistan, was harboring suspects of al-Qaeda that we believed struck us. We gave them an ultimatum. We said, if you continue to harbor these suspects, we will have to take action to remove your government from power and to go after these individuals ourselves. And they refused. We took action. It wasn't a fun thing. It's not something that I wanted to do, or wanted to have our government or military be involved in, but it wasn't, I felt, an option. To that effect, right now in Afghanistan, what we need to do is, I support seeing it through. I don't think that we can, I think, as was laid out in McChrystal's report, there are different levels of security and certainty that we can apply with different funding degrees, and also with the troop involvement. I think I would have sent 40,000 troops over there and asked Congress to continue to fund that effort. But I also think, and this is something that I have not heard too many people at all talking about, and I've been pretty frustrated about it, I also think NATO needs to start pulling their weight. And I think that this conflict, I've been to SHAPE, Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, which is essentially the headquarters for NATO in Europe. I've talked to the generals, I've talked to the ambassadors. They're saying that this is creating an existential threat for NATO, because Article 5 was invoked, saying, you hit one of us, you hit all of us. If they won't step up to the plate and support us in an endeavor in which Article 5 was invoked, the reason for existing of NATO starts to crumble. We can't have Germany saying, okay, we're going to send you a few spy planes, or we'll only go out during the daytime. As soon as there's a sunset, I don't care if there's a firefight, we're withdrawing. That's not okay. Now, we've had some allies really step up in this effort. Britain clearly has been one of them. They're doing a lot of heavy lifting in Helmand Province, which is one of the toughest areas. The Dutch, the Canadians have been tremendously involved. The Danes have also been doing, and the Lithuanians have been really pushing above their weights too. Some of those forces, because the war's unpopular, are starting to withdraw. We need to really push hard and ask President Obama, because I think this is an area where he can have tremendous leverage, to really step to the plate and convince them. Go to those countries, make public, direct addresses to their populations and say, you know what, this isn't a good situation, but we need your support. We're in this together. And let's face it, the implications of an immediate or precipitous withdrawal from that country, it's going to affect each and every one of those countries that has troops over there now, or that's involved in NATO. Because, let's face it, a region in which al-Qaeda has the capacity to develop and strike those countries is not in those countries' interests.
Yes, thank you. How do you think the federal government should handle illegal immigration?
Well, I think anything in which the word illegal is involved needs to be dealt with. My grandmother, who I saw just over Christmas, she was an immigrant from Scotland. She came over from Glasgow, but she went through the appropriate legal channels. And having traveled quite a bit, and I've lived in 5 countries, I've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of people who want to come to the United States. But all of them, when they say, hey, how do I do it? How do I, apply for a green card? How do I, even begin the process? They don't want to go through the legal channels. And for me to say to them, I always help them. I've always, pointed them in the right direction. And then, the debates usually come up. Well, how does everybody else get in there? I hear that the the population. There are a lot of people coming from, X, Y, or Z countries, and it's not only the ones that we talk about a lot either. I mean, for instance, I've got some Irish roots as well. There are a lot of illegal immigrants coming over from Ireland. I mean, Jamaica is another country. Canada is another country. So, but any situation in which people are entering the United States illegally, I think is a clear contravention of the law and needs to be dealt with appropriately.
Will, what role do you believe the federal government should play in education?
As was mentioned, I run a nonprofit organization that deals with education. This is, so the topic of education is truly near and dear to my heart. But I really think it needs to be as minimal as can be possible. If you look again at what we were just talking about, the 10th Amendment. This isn't an issue for, I think, the federal government to play such a significant role in. And I think last time I checked, I believe it was the National Department of Education that was the largest in Washington. And I really think that this needs to be an issue that's dealt with as close to the ground as possible, meaning that the states need to have a larger role in that.
Congressional term limits.
I believe in them. Absolutely, there needs to be checks and balances. If you guys have been reading the news over the past year or so, you might have caught an announcement that we made. Over the next couple weeks, we'll be continuing a congressional reform plan. This last week focused on compensation, in which we said that we need to really just remove all the aspects of the congressional perks that have been developed and carefully protected by people in Washington, such as the pension that congressmen receive. That's probably the clear example. But also, let's make them pay into Social Security. They don't right now. Let's also make them plan for their own retirements and get their own health plans. Just basic stuff so that they can understand what average Americans are going through. But in the coming weeks, we're going to be touching on that issue specifically in our reform plans. Don't tell anyone. But as well as many others. So I do believe that there needs to be checks and balances, and that's really a critical one. We have it for the presidency. It was put in there for a very good reason, and I believe that we need to have that as also for Congress.
What constitutes an appropriate earmark request?
Well, I wouldn't know because I already came out and said that I would refuse to request or accept earmarks.
Would you vote for a bill that was very unpopular with your constituents?
If it was a good bill, if it was a bill that I felt was in the interests of the United States, yes, I would. Now, I'm always going to, regardless of where people stand, I'm always going to listen to what their concerns are. If they, come out in favor or against a bill, I want to hear where their, what their rationales are, what their beliefs are, and I would want my constituents to know that even if we disagreed, I still want them to come, knocking on the door and to sit down and have that conversation with me. But, I'll go out, I'll always collect information, and for any bill, regardless of whether it's an easier or a very, very challenging decision. But I'll gather information, listen to my constituents, but ultimately I'm going to go with what I think is the best thing for the district and for the country.
How do you determine that? Well, let's say, in the case of the health care now, I mean, there's over 60% of Americans, I'm not sure if Connecticut's been polled as a state, but are against it, and yet, congressional leaders think this is a good thing for the country, so they're moving forward. So how do you distinguish what?
They won't be in there long. Ultimately, the great thing about the system that we have set up is that, just as I was speaking about checks and balances, every 2 years, the people have the opportunity to say, you know what, you did a good job, we want you to stick around for another 2, or you did a bad job, we don't want you to be there anymore. And I have a feeling that, especially looking at my district specifically, Mr. Himes has been voting against the best interests of our district and the country on many grounds and for a long time. I mean,